Testing uno, dos, tres. Testing uno, dos, tres. Yeah, I like the way I sound. How you doing, Alan?
I like the way you sound too, man. Good job.
I appreciate that so much about you. Welcome to episode 40, early something about Saber martial arts. I think it's 42.
That
And
sounds about right.
Yeah, and that is so cool to me, first of all. So thank you for sticking with us up to this point. Um, I would really appreciate, I'm just going to get this out of the way early, Alan. I would really appreciate if everybody who listens to this, just my gratitude is overflowing from my heart. Seriously, this is not a Seinfeld sarcasm moment, but I do have a request. Would you please share it with somebody? Just one person?
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, or you don't know who you would share it with that would actually appreciate it, would you leave us a 5-star or a thumbs up or a comment even, or
Yeah.
at least listen to more than 30 seconds on your podcatcher or on YouTube? That would be so excellent, and I would really appreciate that. Even if you were to hit the thumbs down, which, oh gosh, I hope you don't. Even if you were to hit that thumbs down, it would actually be better for us than if you did nothing at all. So I just want to get that out of the way early, Alan. I
hmm
do feel like we have more things on the horizon than we can actually keep up with as far as news wise. But one thing I'll get out of the way, and this is actually going to kind of be in the vein of our topic tonight that you don't even know about, is I mentioned on the episode we recorded the other day, which will be released before people hear this one. I mentioned that we will be doing or I will be doing, you're welcome to join me, sir. I will be
hmm
doing a tomahawk and lightsaber class. And
Heck yeah.
I just announced that on Instagram today with a little video of me from my truck bed doing a little tomahawk work in the driveway with the tomahawk that my kung fu teacher just refurbished. And I was just
Awesome.
kind of putting it through its little paces while, I'm in my Crocs and my Star Wars shirt. It's just me in the everyday. But that's our little video. And if you go on there, it'll tell you the time. Now, by the time you hear this, it won't matter. It'll already be on YouTube. But if you go to our YouTube page, that's why it matters when you listen to this now. If you go to our YouTube page, by the time you hear this, you will have seen in the live tab that there are now 2 videos there. The first one will be the Shicho Kata Determination 1 that I taught like a month or 2 ago. And then the
Awesome.
next one will be this Tomahawk class. And then Alan already knows that I'm going to be bugging him in the very near future here to be doing something similar. But this is going to be interesting. I'm calling it a Taru Hawk because the tomahawk itself, or any axe, we'll just say any axe or mace type weapon, defense is almost non-existent. The defense is the best offense, or offense is the best defense in this case. And so it's going to I'm going to do some tomahawk stuff, and then we'll relate it to some Ataru stuff with an actual saber. And then, yeah, that should eat up a half hour to an hour of people's time. And I appreciate, again, if you spend 30 seconds or more, man, I'm so happy and I appreciate you so much. So, Alan, anything you want to, I know we talked a couple days ago. They don't know that, but you and I do. Anything since then you want to get off your chest?
No, not at the moment. There's nothing really too crazy going on,
Yeah.
martial arts wise. We did skip Father's Day for my Saber classes. I usually teach on Sundays,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Father's Day
Okay.
was on a
Okay.
Sunday. So we're gonna have one again. This is late news because by the time anybody hears this, we're doing a makeup class this coming Sunday. That's about it. Nothing too crazy. I got a couple of people that are working on Ataru right now.
Oh, cool.
Hopefully, they'll survive it. You know, as you do.
Well, if you do want to get into one of Master Venable's classes, email mastervenable@phoenixsaber.com. That's the actual email address, mastervenable@phoenixsaber.com. And ask him. Ask him for some help. If you're in the Phoenix area or able to make it to the Phoenix area in person, or if you'd like to hang out with him, do an online class, I'm sure he can figure out how to make that happen for you.
We'll
And
find a way.
yeah. And same goes for myself as well. If you're in the Ohio area and you'd like to do some MMA and or Saber training and or kickboxing, let me know. SaberMAOutreach@gmail.com. And I'm not just saying that as a personal plug for us to teach classes. I'm saying that as Saber Martial Arts. If you are a martial artist in the area, you're not sure what you want to do, but you like lightsabers and you're listening to this right now, and you're able to come visit us, reach out and we'll let you know how you can do that. That's true for anybody you find on our website, sabermartialarts.life. Anybody you find on there that you might be able to or have a desire to train with, be it Saber Light Knights, Courtney Monroe, Tony Negron down there in South Carolina, et cetera, et cetera. Let us know. We can help you figure out how to get into contact or how to get into a class with them. So anyway, that's that. There's something cool that I didn't tell you the other day because I didn't know the other day. We're trying to get Chad and Damon from Terra Prime onto the podcast, which looks like maybe sometime in mid-July. We haven't put a nail on the date, but there is a date in the air right now. And awesome. Apparently this Sunday, which again, if you're listening to this, will have been maybe a Sunday or two past, is the National Olympic the Olympic Fencing Nationals. And shockingly enough, it's in Columbus, Ohio, 45 minutes from my door.
Nice.
And Chad will be there. So he sent me a message, said, hey, you should come check it out. I don't actually know if I can, but I'm now going to try.
Right.
I've never actually been to a fencing competition, a real fencing competition. Now, I don't actually know. I didn't look at the events. I don't know if there's light fencing that's part of the competition or if they're just going to do some exhibition or if they're just going to be there. I have no clue. But I'm curious. And, of course, I'd like to meet Chad in person. And I'd like to see some real fencing. I'm a martial arts nerd at the end of the day. Even if it's something I've never done or seen before, I'd like to do or see it. So, yeah, it's going to be cool.
Right on.
Maybe I'll bring my daughters. You never know. Maybe we'll make it a family affair.
Yep.
And if I can't make it, and Chad, you're hearing this, know that I tried. Sunday is one of the only family days I get. That being said, it's sometimes cool to do stuff like that and get outside your realm of comfort, as it were. Go outside the comfort zone. That was just a fancier way of saying it. Okay, so that's all the housekeeping. That was kind of fun. So Monday, Tomahawk class. If you're listening to this, it will already be on YouTube on the live section. Of course, SaberMartialArts.life. And now, the topic of the night is... So we're going to talk about some of the weaponry that are not necessarily swords, or maybe not your normal type of swords, that have influenced some of our, we'll call it Neiman, we'll call it Form 6 initially, but we'll just say our Saber Martial Arts programs overall, our curricula, the way we do our forms. So, this we've talked a little here and there, a little about nunchucks and meteor hammers and the like, but there's obviously a deeper conversation to be had here, and I'd like to have it with you tonight. So,
sure.
Let's, I don't know, maybe loosely kind of fall into the framework of the forms. Of course, everything is Shicho. Shicho is everything. So we'll start just by kind of dabbling in Form 1 with some of the weaponry and concepts that are not necessarily sword. So let me start out, with Shicho specifically. Believe it or not, one of the things that I really like to introduce people to, if they're new to any weapon, but the lightsaber is no exception, would be a staff. So I personally think, everybody should start with some sort of stick, be it a short stick or a staff. And they both. I started with both of them around the same age, which was a very young age. I might have been a blue belt or something like that in karate. And even though karate doesn't have weapons, we started with sticks and bow, with the screama sticks and bow. And it like really spoke to me on this deep level where as like, I don't know, I must have been 6 or 7 at the time. It like really got my fire lit to explore all kinds of weapons. Like there really isn't one that I'm not interested in. And I blame that on the
Right.
stick and the staff specifically.
Right.
So there's other reasons, but let me hear a little bit from you first before we delve into that more.
Sure. What exactly are we looking at as far as the are we looking through the lens of Star Wars, or are we looking at the lens of martial arts? Because there's there's a
Well,
couple of different tracks here that we can follow.
let's put it in the lens of, again, sort of people who are training with a lightsaber here in the real world.
Okay, so let's go in that direction then. So most organizations have what has been I guess our colloquialism is exotics.
Yes, yes, yes,
And when we talk about exotics, they are anything but a single lightsaber
yes.
blade. So that is, uh, you know, uh, I mean, I hate to overuse it, but it is a double-edged sword or a 360-degree blade sword
Yeah,
because, the length of uh, these exotic weapons and the safety of them and how you fight with them are all different depending on the different organizations you fight. And sometimes the same organization will treat them differently,
yeah, yeah. That's true.
um, depending on the time and day and the year that you're doing everything. So it really is a matter of preference. So let's talk about the different ones there are.
Now, for
So
anybody who's a little, Alan's specifically talking about exotic sabers, not exotic
yes,
weapons. But in the realm of saber martial arts, those are your exotic weapons. They're all a
right,
lightsaber base. So
right, yeah.
yeah, let's kind of talk about.
So
I mean, I guess you said anything but a single blade. I guess we could put a great saber or an extra long blade in that, but a lot of times that also involves a cross guard.
right.
So a cross
Yeah,
guard saber
so
or a super long saber.
most organizations put a heavier saber, as in a crossguard saber or a great saber, in the
In the
exotics.
exotics
So
qualification.
maybe the single standard saber, I
Yeah,
guess,
I
is what I'm
agree.
trying to say.
Up to around
So
40 inches is generally the accepted standard.
yeah, like what you would normally see canonically on film,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
On in
yeah.
any of the episodes, any of the things.
Hmm.
So things like a Shoto uh, or even Jarkai, which are two weapons at a time, are also linked into that. So those are kind of exotic in the fact that if you are using double weapons, if you're using double weapons, it's always a a different type of fight.
Yes, that's true.
Mainly because one should always be moving as the other one is blocking, or they have to simultaneously be able to move. Because usually what happens is if anybody doesn't has anything, I find myself even with the loads of training that I've had, I kind of relegate to very basic stuff sometimes,
Yeah, sure.
and mainly one arm is blocking and the other arm is attacking,
Sure,
and
sure.
so and depending on the style and everything like that, sometimes you can switch it up. And if I remind myself that while I'm fighting, I will do the same. But again, it's not the first thing I reach for
Hmm.
is Jarkai, but I enjoy that more than the so-called pulled weapons
Sure.
that are out there.
Yeah.
So pulled weapons include a pike or a spear, Um, and sometimes, and again, measurements vary
Hmm.
depending on the
Yes.
organization, depending on the day,
And there's also
the
a right
face
way to
phase of
measure
the moon.
and call things, but hey, it's
Yeah,
okay to be wrong in life.
yeah, yeah. And it
That's my
depends. It
personal
depends
bias.
on,
That is not the opinion of
yeah,
the official SMAF company. That's my personal
yeah,
bias. Call things
right.
what they are, but hey,
But
whatever suits your
but then,
organization.
yeah. So that's a whole other thing. So basically, that is an extended hilt.
Yep. Yep.
Um, uh, and that just means that the hilt is usually more than, uh, I feel like 22, 24 inches.
That's a
Um,
generally what I would call a great sword or longer. But like if we're talking spear, I feel like your hilt is generally at least like 48 inches.
right. Well, again, it depends on preference
I mean,
and interpretation
what's
of
a standard TSL
rules,
hilt?
right?
Like 14 to 16 inches?
I don't know off the top of my head, but standard, I believe, can go up to 14. Yes. So
So for us
that.
in SMAF, I do believe 14 is the max for our stand. It's on our website in our weapons glossary.
Mhm.
By the way, check out sabermartialarts.life. Go to the weapons glossary. If you have no idea what we're talking about and you want to know, this is all there. Measurements,
Mhm.
everything is there. And actually, this is tournament legal for SMAF too. So like, now of
Mhm.
course, all of our organizations they do reserve the right to change their own rules as they see fit. We have no problem with
Mhm.
that. But for us, if you're gonna just go with our standards, it's all listed there, and we already did the legwork for you. This is based on research of actual weaponry from the real world. That part of which we'll talk about tonight. And what
Mhm.
Alan's talking about is the spear thing, the pole weapons. That would be generally just a spear or a pike, but also I guess double bladed fall into that for you as well, Alan?
As far as
A pole
pike,
weapon, a pole saber.
so no, because saber staff's a different
It's like
beast.
its own animal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a different beast, and it has to be called differently than the other
Yeah,
ones.
I agree with that.
So a lot of the pike discussion is mainly in thrusts, because
Yeah.
when you fight with an actual spear, it's mainly thrusts, right?
Yes.
So, but that's pretty dangerous depending on where you hit or how you hit with an extended blade. So it, the issue isn't the weapon; it is the wielder at that point. So, like, so a lot of our discussion about these different pulled weapons and cross guards and stuff like that. There's a lot of discussion in, um, you know, power mitigation and calibrating to different weapons and being able to understand that we are not trying to brain each other with clubs. We are actually treating it as a lightsaber, right?
Well, as
So,
a martial art too. I mean, we're trying
mhm.
to employ technical techniques, if you will, right?
Right, and part of that is understand. So, we just said two different statements there that actually um, kind of are contradictory, because if we treat it like a lightsaber
There are no
blade,
real techniques.
yeah, and also the fact that a touch is all you need. It's a sport,
Yeah.
right? At that point, it's touch. It's a fencing match. It's not a simulation of real combat.
No.
So when you look at that and see it like, okay, well, this is our martial art. This is the thing that we chose to employ our other martial arts to be able to interpret this weapon of sci-fi fantasy, right?
Well,
So
that's exactly it. It's a matter of making the technique exist through the lens of like we said earlier, other weapons that exist on Earth, and not just
right,
swords, right?
right,
And the pikes, the spears, they give you the opportunity to do that. That's another weapon. That was the Shicho of the ancient world. We
right.
don't we don't have expensive swords for you farmers who are fighting for us. We have to put
But we can put a knife at the end of a stick.
or even a sharp stone,
Yeah,
even a blunt
or a sharp
stone.
stick.
Yeah. We'll just whittle the edge, the end down. Sorry, I kind of interrupted you, but I just jumped on the hot potato is all.
Yeah. So when we talk about pulled weapons, that's a thing, right? Because you'll have a bunch of other weapons out there that are not able to be put into quote unquote lightsaber form, but some of
Hmm.
their techniques can be used.
Right, like the
So
tomahawk. I mean, a
like the
saber axe
tomahawk,
is a tough concept to put in my head. I guess there would be a
right?
way, but it's a tough concept.
Right. And there's axes and halberds and things like that, things
Vibro
that are
axe
not.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you can use that, yes, but at the same time, is it, you know,
it's not a
a
true
lightsaber?
proxy.
No.
No.
Does it exist in the Star Wars universe? Yes. But will it eat up your polycarbonate blade? Also, yes.
Yeah. Well,
So,
in addition to that, I mean, even just some sword techniques and things. Like,
mhm,
does it behave like a lightsaber? Still no. But can you
right.
still make it work with somehow? Yes.
Yeah. So easy enough for a sword, right? But for exotics, there's
There's a little
an
thinking.
element of there's a element of danger
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
safety that we have to definitely address. For example, um, we talked about a meteor hammer.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
canonically, the Praetorian Guard in the movies have basically a chain whip
Sure. Sure.
slash sword thing,
And we're led to
and
believe
we
there's going to be a saber whip in the Acolyte, unless the trailer's wrong, right?
right. Right,
So
exactly. So
I know what
there
you're getting
there
at.
is
Go ahead and get at
stuff
it.
there, but again, being able to for a point choke somebody is not really good.
Yeah, or
For
even just to send like a weighted or a whippy thing. Once it's gone, it's gone. It's kind of like a bullet in that way. You
right,
can't unfire a nunchuck very easily. You can't
right,
unfire a whip very easily.
right,
And when you try to pull it back, what happens? It cracks. So,
right,
you're not, yeah. Safety is a definite concern for things like that, even
mhm,
down to legal things like spears, like you said with thrusting. But still, there's there's ways to go about there's ways we're even exploring to
mhm,
explore these concepts, right? Like,
mhm.
let's say you do kata. Well, definitely you can employ a saber whip in kata if you're not doing it with people in the way. And that's a cool thing to be able to do, but how can you apply that to a regular lightsaber? I don't know. That's up to you, man. That's what your version of saber martial arts. If the whip is something that you're interested in, and you want to get better at lightsaber fighting all at once, like, well, hey, there's something that you can incorporate and try. I don't know. Crazy brain, right? I don't know.
Right. Well, also we're once again talking about simulation, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Because
mm-hmm.
again, not able to just swing a weapon. Um, Notice we don't actually have a blaster division, so
Right,
it's
right.
a little thing that'd be fun, but it's not exactly something that we have yet to make safe.
Hello.
Oh no, I'm still here. Sorry. Uh,
I just lost a word or two. We
okay.
we don't actually have a blaster division, and then we you kind of cut out.
Oh, we don't actually have a blaster division because the safe the safety aspect of it, plus like you know it kind of not everybody would be able to block a blaster with their what 1 inch diameter blade.
Well, this is
It's
this
not
is right on topic. I mean, we used to do this in and I know you've done similar stuff. We used to do this in Saber class. We had Nerf guns at the studio, at the karate studio for birthday parties that we did with Nerf blasters and stuff.
right.
And we would actually try to like deflect little Nerf darts or in self defense class, like put a dart in there and actually shoot somebody if you were doing gun defense with the dart, if they weren't fast enough or whatever. Which, by the way, everybody gets shot multiple times.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But anyway, that it's something you can try. A better way to do it might be like tennis balls or little racket balls or something.
Right.
That was a great way to do it. And, in MMA class, we do the same thing. We'll toss little tennis balls while you're standing against the wall or against the cage and, try and dodge, try and slip, try and cover with your palm, all that stuff.
Right.
That goes right along the lines of non-sword weapons though, right? Like employing something like that, but come up with your own rule set or your own division or your own like training regimen for it. I feel like Tony does a little bit of this because he's got a lot of kids in his classes, like teenagers and younger. So
yeah, he keeps it fresh.
Yeah, and I think he does stuff like that, and I think it's a good idea. It doesn't have to be a big part of your training, but it is cool. But that's not the point you're making specifically. I just, I think the point really of this kind of conversation though is if you look at the lightsaber just as a sword, or if you look at the exotics weapons just as the thing they are, just as a spear, just as a crossguard sword, then maybe you are pigeonholing your. Of course, it's a good thing. You want to learn those techniques, but maybe you're pigeonholing yourself a little bit. Maybe you do want to kind of explore how can a spear help my actual saber, like standard saber work, right? How could a training with a double-bladed saber, what does that tell me about a real-world weapon that I might want to start? Like maybe I've always wanted to learn how to actually use a bow, a staff, right? But
and that's another one, right? Is a bow.
Well, it's not the same thing as a double-bladed saber, but the double-bladed saber makes people interested in it, right? Like Donatello, Darth Maul, Rafiki, for God's sakes. All of the coolest characters wield sticks. Yoda, right? Like all the Gandalf, all the coolest characters wield sticks and staffs. And I think it's a really important weapon throughout history because that was probably the original weapon, was a rock and a stick.
Yep.
Sticks and stones, right?
Yep.
And so there is a deeper conversation about all of the, and it's almost too deep, too many layers to the spider web, if you will, too many onions to the ogre, to kind of really unpack it all. But like, I mean, we've already thrown out 100 different weapon names: tomahawk, meteor hammer, whip, chain whip. We talked about sticks and stones. We talked about guns and blasters, right? Like all these things.
The little slingshot thing that Ezra has on his wrist.
Oh, that's true too. I love that thing. Believe it or not, I love that thing. Well, and his lightsaber is also a blaster, isn't it? It shoots like little Kyber bolts at people. But all of these things throughout real history inform the way some swords and just battlefield tactics overall, but specifically some swords were developed and used throughout time, but also down to even like the types of knives and non-firearms that our militaries carry now. The weapons training that we do in martial arts class, of course. But then also like in Star Wars, they talk a lot about in lore, especially with the forms, they talk a lot about how the presence or absence of a blaster might inform an entire generation of Jedi's training. The presence or absence of dark side users will, and as we, spoiler alert, may have seen in the Acolyte a little bit this week, may have made some Jedi complacent in their training or dedicated twofold to their training in the case of someone like Anakin Skywalker, right? Like, so I don't know. I mean, it's talking about Saber training specifically, maybe not his Jedi training. I don't know.
But also,
I feel
martial arts
Go ahead.
have always evolved because of the technology.
Well, yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So that kind of works. One of the best examples is the I can think of is the rattan shield that you've probably seen in a bunch of movies. Around shield made of rattan. It was meant to stop the Mongols because their arrows would bounce off of it.
Well, the Mongols
And
had exceptional straight swords, did they not?
yep, and exceptional archery, which is
Yeah, some of the
they
best in the
had
entire world.
mounted archery, which is something that the Chinese didn't know what to do with.
Now, this is
They were like,
another martial arts weapon that I think really informs, just as a martial artist, has really informed me. But you brought up the Mongol. I mean, this, you talk about technology. The Mongols were way ahead of their time on archery technology. Their
right,
recurve bows were basically the ancient world's version of a compound bow today,
right.
and a very, very efficient compound bow.
Yeah, and they most of them knew how to ride before they could walk. So
And yes, they're shooting these
everything,
things off of ponies
yeah,
and
yeah,
reindeer.
exactly, exactly. So it's not like I said, as they moved, right? As they assimilated empires, they assimilated their technology. They're like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
well that doesn't work, but that doesn't work for me, but it could work for somebody else.
yeah.
Let's take a look at this. Let's see if we can improve upon it and see if we can adapt it to our uses. And I mean, Genghis Khan took over half the known world.
Well,
Seemed to have worked out.
to your point originally, though, that to develop a shield that would
Hmm.
be any resistance to this type of force at that time in history, again, is
Hmm.
another technological marvel. And the
Right.
shield, to get right back full circle again to our original
Hmm.
topic, is one of those weapons that largely informs my saber training as well as many
Hmm.
others, or just sword training overall. I mean, I, if you want to learn, in my opinion, and if you learn anything from my Shien curriculum, that reverse grip, we're doing shield work long before we ever turn our saber backwards.
Right.
We're gonna do sword and shield. We'll do some spear and shield. We'll just hold a shield. We'll do some kicking shields. Right? We're doing everything with a shield before we ever turn our saber backwards, because turning your saber backwards, you might as well just use it as a shield. It's not very offensive of a weapon,
Right.
regardless of what The Witcher would tell you. So, again, we're just layering on. Okay, so we've talked about sticks and stones. We talked about the spears and the clubs and halberds and the whips and chains. Now we've got shields on top of that, and that can come down. Uh, uh, Carvaster, we talked about from the Shatterpoint novel. Mace Windu's, you know, ghost brother or whatever you want to call it. Um, he fought with the Captain America double shields basically,
Hmm.
and that's a version of Jarkai.
Right.
I mean, go watch Infinity War or whatever movie it is where he uses those dope things. And though it's a fantasy movie, like, you're getting an idea of like a whole other world of martial arts you could have never even thought of. And a lot of that is barehanded martial arts too, right? Like a shield is
Hmm.
an extension of your forearm in many ways. Um, oh God. Okay, pile me on. Give me some more. What else you got?
Yeah. So things like I said, the that will inform us are going to be like things that we can make safe, right?
Yeah, sure.
Things that we can mitigate with not just a calibration of power, but also the technology that we have to make it. So, for example, we probably won't see an LED whip, employed in competition, mainly because of certain things like, the fact that it's an LED whip
Choking
and
factor is a big deal. Choking factor
choking,
is a huge deal.
hmm
See,
choking, and
spectator
also the
safety.
breaking of the LED, right?
Oh, that's true too.
Because it
Yeah, I didn't think
because
about
it
that.
have to be a strip,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of technological stuff that
And
has to happen
before
there.
our listeners yell at their car radios or whatever, that they already make, uh, saber whip. We understand that. It's
Is
not a
it safe?
matter of whether or not it's available. It's a matter of whether or not it's safe
Right.
in actual
Combat.
use. Yeah,
Yeah.
competition specifically.
Yeah.
And like I said, kata or something like that, or if you did like a fight scene and you were
Hmm.
able to ensure that you both, like, if you trust each other and you enter some sort of competition, pairs competition in a martial arts tournament,
Hmm.
and you do a fight scene with a whip like that, I've seen
Hmm.
it. Kung fu tournaments, you'll see chain whips and things like that all the time.
Hmm. Yeah.
But there's an expectation that nobody's going to get hit with that thing.
Yeah. And also, if we look at those other martial arts and the other forms of combat sports with weapons, especially, nobody there has made it safe either.
Right.
So until technology catches up with us where we can do this safely, chances of you seeing a saber whip in competition are pretty low.
Well, what
Not
did I say like a
impossible,
minute
pretty
ago?
low.
Again, just because
Yeah.
something exists in comp, or just because a rule set exists where that allows for things, does not mean it is safe for everybody to do.
Right. Exactly.
And you also have to know your own limitations. But let me ask you a little later,
Mhm.
how have some of the, because you have way more experience with flexible weaponry than I do, as any of our
Mhm.
listeners are already aware. So how has that kind of influenced some of your actual standard saber work?
So a lot of it is just awareness, right?
Mm,
So every weapon, doesn't matter which weapon it is, teaches you spatial awareness,
mm-hmm,
or at
mm-hmm,
least it should teach you spatial awareness
mm-hmm,
if you're trying to do it right. So, like most things in life, it comes down to distance and timing.
mm-hmm.
And if you can find the right distance and timing to anything, you can probably figure out how it works. So, when you deal with, let's say, a meteor hammer or
Mm-hmm.
a rope dart or any of those kind of flexible weapons,
Go
three
Google
sectional
these things,
staff.
people. Go Google these
Yeah,
things as we talk. Go ahead.
yeah, a three sectional staff. It, the biggest part about flexible weapons is, like you said, as soon as you stop its movement, it comes back toward you. As
or
soon as you,
or doesn't die instantly like a sword would, right? Like
right,
it continues through the target
yeah,
for a spell.
correct,
It's
and
either
and
going through or back to you, in other words.
and if you hit anything with it, if you're not practiced at hitting anything in it, chances are it will
It
come
will
back
come
and
back
hit
to
you.
you for sure. Yes. Yes. That yes.
um, so a lot of that is that's the biggest part, right? Is uh, start looking at what your uh, intention is with the weapon, and then see if it works for you. For some people, they get hit by their nunchucks and they're like, okay, I'm putting that down and never touching it again.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people like, oh, I hit myself with my nunchucks. I must not have been paying attention. I didn't do that technique right.
I must not
So it
have been
really,
practicing well enough, right? Like
yeah,
a total opposite thought. The pain is as a lesson
right,
every time on how to do better. And
right.
that I don't think that's right or wrong. I think flexible weapons are kind of unique in the sense that if you like them or if you're good with them, that's not necessarily the norm. I feel like they
Hmm.
are kind of unique in that way. They do attract a certain clientele, so to speak. But it
Right.
is good to dabble a little bit. I think everybody should dabble in some type of flexible weapon that's maybe a little uncomfortable for them, maybe a little dangerous to the user. I don't want you to cut yourselves with anything. That's not what I mean. And I don't want you to
Hmm.
brain yourselves either.
Right.
But once in a while, with like a foam pair of nunchucks or a three sectional staff to kind of get knocked in the shoulder or, maybe in your manhood a little bit. Um, not on purpose, but, you do it once or twice, you're rarely going to do it again. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's pretty common sense when you say it, but sometimes you need to hear it. So and it's
Yeah.
good. We've seen nunchuck sabers before. They're
Hmm.
novelty. We've
Yeah. Duck
seen.
Dodgers in the 23rd and a half century.
I know Alan. Three sectional saber used to be your sign off before this party's over.
Right.
And
I'm
if
still looking for one.
I know,
Anybody out there knows how to make it?
well, we're still on the
Uh,
lookout for a good sabersmith. So hit
yeah,
us up. I know you're out there,
yeah,
civilized sabers and the
right.
like.
And if you can make a three-sectional saber, you're at the top of my list.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, seriously, this is not a joke at this point. Although it sounds jokey. But anyway, I think doing these things, it just gives you. I think the three sectional saber is actually kind of unique in that it's one of the only real weapons that exists in the world that is
Hmm.
kind of useful for a double bladed saber,
Right.
because a double bladed saber is so unique in the sense that it doesn't actually behave like a staff, regardless of the fact that people call it saber staff. I actually don't like that terminology. I'll use it once in a while just to be clear, but I don't like
Hmm.
it because it doesn't really behave like a staff. You can kind of use some staff techniques, and if you play with hilt length versus blade length, sure, there's some compromise you can make on your technique choices, but really it's more like a three sectional staff than anything else, which for anybody who's not totally aware is, generally speaking, Alan, you can always correct me if I'm wrong because this is more your style than mine, but generally speaking, it's three of equally sized sticks put together
Hmm.
with equally sized chains.
Correct.
And that is very much like what we see Darth Maul use, right? That
Right.
is very much like what we see in most double bladed saber situations. And
Hmm.
if you were to get a double bladed saber from, XYZ Sabersmith and try to go fight with it, it would behave a lot like that. The ends of a three sectional staff have
Hmm.
minds of their own, and they are not the same mind as the middle section. They are not the same mind as the outside of the other section. They are not the
Hmm.
same mind as the one you have between your ears, right? And
Right.
again, Alan, you know this better, way better than I do. I am awful with the three sectional staff and never really had to use it very much. We had a couple of them at the dojo, but only one person ever knew how to use them.
Oh, cool.
So,
Well, when I see you, I'll show you how to use it.
okay, I'm okay with this. Do you do you have some thoughts on that, or maybe some other weapons that might help with the double bladed saber?
Oh, a lot of that is understanding that it is uh, just a reverse grip. In
Twice.
the end, it's a reverse grip in each hand,
Yeah.
and um, yes, you can, have both thumbs facing the same way, but it just doesn't work as well. Um,
Well, I think
it
being able
there,
to switch your grip a lot does help.
yes, if you can switch your grip, there are techniques and things while you're
Sure, sure.
spinning the saber. However, spinning the saber and actually doing anything with the saber are
That
two
that's the
different.
that's the point. Like actually making your hit count, or whatever the case
Yeah.
is, actually blocking or parrying during that spin. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you're right. Like just from a basic sense, it really is just two reverse grips, and they can
Hmm.
kind of move independently, but also they're tied together.
Yeah. So when you're looking at all of these um, saber staff techniques, and everybody does a bunch of cool like spinning techniques with them because they look awesome. They look
It really
great.
does look great.
Um, but
It really does.
once you ask somebody to hit with them, it all falls apart, right?
Yeah.
It does take a lot more time, effort, and energy to actually win with a saber staff than it would just spinning it around and making yourself feel cool.
In Star
Um,
Wars, a saber staff is weightless on two ends. It has
right,
gravity, but it's weightless. Uh,
right,
in the real world, it's actually like twice as heavy as a standard saber,
right. Because you have twice
twice
the
as much
saber,
saber.
but they're joined in the middle. And if you don't know what you're doing, you will hurt yourself.
Well,
And
yeah, if you
that by that
switch your wrist might not be ready to take it on one hand. You know.
Right. But by that, I also mean the fact that because there are two reverse grips, chances are when you're swinging with one, you're hitting yourself
Yeah,
with the
you're
other.
hitting yourself with the other.
So,
Especially if you
uh,
rely on traditional bow techniques. Most of the
right,
bow techniques I know, they rely on smacking yourself in the ribs or the shoulder or the
right,
armpit, like, or whatever,
right,
as
exactly,
you are striking the other person, and
right, and
that
that's
does not work with a
power mid.
saber staff.
Right, it's power mitigation in the real world with
Yeah.
a stick,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if we're talking about using a lightsaber, a laser sword blade, that that kills you as well as it kills the other guy.
Well, and that's
So,
why I think the three sectional staff works, because every time I've used it, like I said,
hmm
like I'll think to myself, like, okay, I'm gonna be aware of both ends, right? And I do
hmm
not even, I don't even want to call it a strike. I basically just twitch and I kill myself every time. But I'll just like, I'll do what I think is maybe part of emotion, right? And like
hmm
it, like the one end will start going, and I'll get so happy with the one Mississippi that worked, and then all of a sudden,
hmm
like the back of my head, I'll get like almost KO'd, and
hmm
I'll be like, oh, damn, like that's right, there's another side to this
Well,
thing.
also along those lines, the reason that happens is because you slow it down. If you
Oh.
there's only really two settings
Well, and that's the
to
case with the saber
to
staff too. I feel like if you
mhm,
slow down, that's when you start to anchor things in your body and cut yourself. But if you keep the
right.
motion going, you're more likely to keep it outside of the danger. Anyway, keep going.
Right, that was going to be my point, is you actually have to move your body, and moving your body moves the
Mm-hmm,
weapon.
mm-hmm.
If you don't move your body in the right way to allow the weapon to be the weapon, it will not work.
That sounds a
It's,
lot
I
like
mean,
what you told me when you were showing me some of that chain whip stuff in San Diego.
correct. That's also true. The it'll everything about flexible weapons is the ability to relax
Uh
and
huh.
let the weapon do the work.
For
And
sure, I feel that.
for most martial artists and most fighters, we are our fast twitch is to flex. It's not to relax
Mm-hmm.
because we're about to get hit by a club. We're about to get, you know,
Yeah.
uh, so a lot of the training is kind of antithesis because again, um, it's not going to be the first thing you reach for, on your rack if you're, trying to, if all you have is, you know, weapons outside of a pistol rifle, shotgun, or bow. So it's like, okay, well, I have a club, that's easy enough. Anybody can use a club, but nobody says, okay, I have a rope. I'm going to protect myself with a rope. You know,
I know.
Eh,
Let me tie a heavy thing to the end of it. That'll be the
yeah.
best option.
And then as soon as you swing the heavy thing, it comes back and hits
Yeah,
you, and you're
yeah,
like, okay, never again. So a lot of that is a lot of this is going to be practice. A
yeah.
lot of this is going to be just understanding that, yeah, this is going to suck for a little bit. And it sucks to suck, but you know what? If you embrace that and realize that everything you're good at, you sucked at first,
Mm.
it works out.
Well, let's take that
It
right back
works
to
out.
saber training, because again, how the hell does that benefit me if all I really want to do is compete with a lightsaber? Well,
hmm
you just said it. It teaches you to relax. It teaches you to let the
hmm
weapon be the weapon. And I think with lightsabers in particular, this bouncing back thing, it's a real thing with the lightsaber. It behaves
hmm
more like a stick than anything else anyway, right? So we're talking about real world lightsabers, of course. In Star Wars, they have their own physics, and those physics change depending on who's making the movie. So also, the Acolyte had some cool lightsaber physics. We'll talk about that later. Oh,
hmm
not tonight. We'll talk anyway. Whoa, episode 5, people. If you're not an Acolyte believer, at least just try episode 5. Just taste it. Just
hmm
give me a no thank you bite. Anyway,
hmm
so I think the sense of relaxation, the sense of letting the weapon be the weapon, which for lightsaber rings very true. It's its own beast. It's a very nuanced thing. The double bladed saber being its very own thing, but
hmm
the lightsaber class of weaponry is its own thing. In Star Wars, it's its own thing, and other weapons were devised to counteract lightsabers specifically. So I think the flexible weaponry does have its place. I think it's not that hard of a thing to go buy a cheap pair of nunchucks, right? And just like practice with them. Now, if they're illegal in your state, excuse me, first of all, write your congressman, tell them that is messed up, or whoever takes care of nunchuck law in your state, tell them that is stupid and messed up. Also, direct them to the nearest taekwondo school where I guarantee there are 100 pairs of nunchucks, legal or not. But sorry, taekwondo. I didn't mean to put you on blast. That was a compliment in many ways. Actually, have you seen many taekwondo students? The cool thing about learning nunchucks as a taekwondo person, quick sidebar, is that your feet are already so dope. You can already kick so well. You probably already know some acrobatics and stuff. Like, all you need to do now with your arms is like more dope stuff.
Yep.
So I think if you're a taekwondo person and maybe punching isn't like the most like deep part of your game, sure, just add some nunchucks to your life because it's good. But I think anybody should pick up a pair of nunchucks. What a stupid, easy, super like normal thing to just like have as a martial artist, you know, and do some sort like do some saber work with the nunchucks. Figure out how. Like what we're talking about, because even with a single saber, Alan, I don't know about you, but I cut myself sometimes as I'm working with a single saber.
I did a thing the other day where I did a very simple technique, and I was using a different saber than I usually use, and it's actually a little bit longer and actually
Weighted
has a
differently,
couple.
right?
Yeah, and I lifted my sword up and I hit myself on the head with the
There you
hilt, and
go.
I went, well, I wasn't paying attention now, was I?
There you go.
So,
I mean, if that was really Star Wars, like how dumb does that Jedi, like how Coleman Trevor does that Jedi feel?
right.
Poor Coleman, man. Poor Coleman. So let's jump into something else. The tomahawk, obviously, I mentioned earlier. That's kind of like an Ataru specialty. There are other things like that. I would feel like whips and chains do fall largely into the Ataru realm because you're not parrying anything with a whip and a chain.
Yeah.
You're constantly either striking or moving it around you, right?
Right.
And that's really all flexible. Like you're not really blocking things with a nunchuck. In our forms, I do have moments where you might block like a kick with the middle of the nunchucks or something, or strike somebody in a way that is block-ish. But you're not redirecting anybody's sword with nunchucks. You're not redirecting anybody's sword with a meteor hammer, unless you wrap it around it and yank it from them or something like that.
Right. Correct.
So, let's think Gemso. Let's think some of these other, shields that very easily fit. Sorry, fits into Suresu and Shien, like we mentioned. But I don't know. Give me another exotic earth or weapon or something like that might fit into. Let's say Form 5. Let's say Gemso and Shien, and we'll extend that to Suresu a little bit because they're all a little bit defensive and counter offensive.
Sure. A lot of the exotic saber stuff, because they tend to be bigger weapons, tend to fit in the gemso and uh, category,
The power's
mainly
already there.
because of the power,
Yeah.
because of the body movements are already there, right? So if we talk about like Zweihander or German longsword,
Great sword of a sort.
that's
Claymores.
yeah, but that's meant to stand behind a bunch of shields and poke at people, just like a pike. And then if the shields die, then you actually have a sword that you're swinging around.
And you can half sword it, which would be a similar grip to a spear or pike.
Right. And that's how it starts. And then, once people start dying, then you have a clear field. You don't take out your own people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of those things. A halberd works basically the same. A lot of the pulled weapons, have that. But depending on the style of combat you actually do, for example, if you're using a pike or western type of spear, generally tends to be a longer idea again to stand behind
Mm-hmm.
shields.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas a Chinese or Japanese spear might be shorter.
Six,
Um,
7, maybe 8 feet.
yeah, or even shorter than that.
Even shorter
So
than that, yeah.
yeah,
Some of those
because
African
they
spears and South American, I mean, we're talking 48, 50
mhm,
inches tip to
right.
tip.
Some of them are one-handed
Even
spears,
some of the
right?
Rome, yeah. I mean, that's not specific to the regions we're mentioning. Each one of them has their unique uh,
Right,
uh, uh, exceptions to what we're talking about. But yeah, I mean, just generally speaking.
right. The Maori Taiha
Yes.
spear
I was
slash
hoping that
sword.
would come up at some point tonight. That and
Yeah.
they also have a spear, very short shaft,
Hmm.
zero ability to block, parry, or really even strike, but it's got
Hmm.
stingray barbs in the end of it. And they
Yeah.
stick you with it once, and those stingray barbs don't come out of you, they come out of the spear. And
Right.
that is not really a weapon. That is not going to do anything for you on the battlefield. But what does it teach you for saber work? Make each strike count is what that
Right.
teaches you, because your life might be depending on it, and they're
Right.
not actually, but the competition might be depending on it. So
Sure.
make that strike true. But to your larger point here, continue on.
Yeah. So if you are looking into exotics and you have an idea, for example, I thought you would bring this up, but I'll go ahead and do it. Saber tonfa,
Well,
right?
I was hoping one of us would, but I didn't. I didn't see a moment yet. But this is the
So
moment. Go for it. Let's talk Tonfa.
so tonfa is fun and great. It makes no sense in
It
Star
makes no
Wars.
sense. I don't get it.
It's
I do
there.
get it, but I say I
Yeah.
don't get it because that's generally the purpose. It's weird.
Yeah. So like as an energy weapon or one of the, electro weapons in Star Wars, it makes sense. But as a lightsaber, it makes no sense. Let me
Correct.
put
Yes, yes,
my
yes.
blade, let me put my blade right next to my forearm, and let me absorb things with it. And every time I absorb strikes with it, it hits my forearm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
thereby
Yeah.
cutting myself.
Well, the only way I ever really was like, oh, that would actually be really useful as a tonfa is
Mhm.
just the extra leverage of being able to chop with that like catch on your pinky, or like if you were to hold it like a regular sword but put that that right angle handle, that right
Mhm.
angle grip like at the bottom of your two-handed grip, if you can
Right.
kind of visualize what I'm saying, that might add a little leverage to your chop. I'm not saying it would though, I'm just guessing. And
Mhm.
it's still also kind of stupid. Like why
Yeah.
would you change your whole saber hilt to do that? But real world tonfa, I mean, does this have an application to how we would learn saber martial arts?
I mean, if you're teaching somebody how to use a reverse grip, then yes.
Okay. Okay. Maybe elaborate a little, because it's not super specifically the same thing, but there are maybe some similarities.
So a lot of real world Tonfa is going to be blocking with the weapon
And
with your
punching,
forearm, and, with your forearms, and then punching with
yeah,
the other part.
with the other part of
So
the tonfa, or slapping
yeah,
as you extend the tonfa.
right, right. So like a lot of the nightstick stuff that you'll see,
Hmm.
uh, and that is taught to law enforcement. You can also It's also a subdual weapon, so you actually can use it a little bit
Hook,
more
pull,
easily to
double
tie somebody
grip.
up.
Yep, tie somebody up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So.
I think of it like a tire iron, or like if you're an 80s or 90s kid, those steering wheel locks that people used to put on their cars in the
Mhm.
summertime when they would leave the top off their convertible or whatever. What did they call those? The club. The club.
Yeah.
Actually, the club was a dope like weapon, heavy as hell,
Hmm.
but it was a fun little weapon. I remember one of our karate teachers had one in his car, and he brought it in one day and just had a little fun with class. Like, hey, what if somebody's trying to get into your car? Like, do you have your club in your? Of course, this I haven't seen one of those things in forever and a day.
Right.
I don't know when the last time you use one of those things, or you ever seen one of those things lately?
I never had one of those things because
No.
I figured that if somebody was gonna steal my vehicle, they're determined to steal my vehicle. It's not a club wouldn't stop them.
Well, I don't know this for
Um,
sure, but once they get the steering wheel unlocked, couldn't they still like steer with it, or did it somehow block them from steering with it?
it was supposed to,
Yeah.
but now most
Nothing to
cars
do with
come with
saber
a
martial arts, by the way. But
yeah, well, a different type of martial art. Um, but yeah, it's meant to. So it's
the
a theft
tonfa,
deterrent.
tonfa
But
is the
now,
topic at hand.
right? But now every car comes with a steering wheel lock. So
That's true.
it's
Actually, I didn't even think about
it's
that.
kind of yeah. Again, technology. Right? Technology. Basically evolving the way
Um,
things work.
so tonfa reverse grip, sure. I mean, how useful is reverse grip? We talked about as a shield, which tonfa is interesting because it is almost that. It is a sword or a stick that is a shield in a way. Like you said, most of the stuff you're doing is either starting or largely incorporates blocking.
Hmm.
And then there's counter punching. There's joint locking and stuff like that that you can do with
Hmm.
them. You're not doing that with the saber at all.
Right.
But
Exactly.
if you were, let's say you were to incorporate pummel strikes in your, because I know some sword tournaments and things, eskrima tournaments, you can do pummel or butt strikes. In our SMAF rule sets, we do have rules that provision for them, although it's not the standard in our tournaments. We do have
Hmm.
rules that provision for them should people want to, and with control, it's obviously the fencing mask can handle it. But you see it all the time in choreography. People hit with
Yeah.
the pummel, people hit with elbows and things like that. So I think a tonfa, especially if you're into choreography, that's something that's really cool to incorporate into your training. And
Right.
it's not an especially difficult weapon to start picking up and understanding.
Yeah. Agreed.
The layers are there though. I mean, you can really get into a good thesis on the tonfa.
Mhm.
Wacky weapon. I don't have a ton of experience with it, but it's something that, like with nightsticks and law enforcement, I've taught police officers and things, not specifically their techniques, but they would always incorporate their techniques into the stuff we were doing in class. So.
Right.
Okay, let's jump around a little more. Give me a wacky weapon that maybe would have absolutely nothing to do with a lightsaber that we can somehow shoehorn in here.
Sure. Like something that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, well, maybe something we haven't talked about yet.
Okay. Well, how about my good old fashioned saber scythe?
Oh yeah, yeah. You were on this kick for a minute. You even built a prototype out of some Ultra
Yeah,
Sabers parts at one point.
I did. I still have them.
Oh, there you go. Some Tonfa and Yari extensions, if I remember correctly.
Hmm. Correct.
So let's talk about Saber Scythe, which would have we ever seen that in a Star Wars yet? Maybe in that Visions, in that first
No,
season of Visions, they didn't somebody have a scythe that was
maybe.
like a vibro scythe or some
No,
nonsense.
there was a saber umbrella.
Oh yes, not the same thing, but hey, if it's canon,
Yeah.
now we have a conversation that maybe we have to talk about umbrella work. Well, the penguin used an umbrella, so maybe this is a topic we have to talk about. Okay, so so but not to be too silly. What were we saying? Uh, damn it, you got me thinking about the damn umbrella now. Scythe,
Yep.
scythe, saber scythe, or just scythe in general. What the hell would that do for you as a saber martial artist?
So part of that is
Just
the
fun,
off.
just having fun.
Well, it's being able to fight something unexpected, really, and coming from unexpected angles. Because if you've ever fought with a curved hilt, uh, the angles of attack become slightly different
They do.
on how
They
you
do. And
hold
defense, in
your
my opinion, becomes way different. But that's a
right,
different topic for a
right.
different day.
No, I mean it's related to this one
Okay.
because
Okay.
now the whole blade is at a different angle
Oh,
than
that's
you're
true.
used to,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
That makes it a
So
different weapon.
makes it slightly harder to defend with,
Yeah.
right? If we're only going blade on blade, but at the same time, it's harder for you to also defend against. So if we're really looking at wacky stuff, in the traditional shape of a normal of a scythe from the real world, right?
Yeah.
That would basically be one of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas there's also ways of looking at scythe as far as like putting a curved hilt at the end of a pike, let's
Yeah.
say, and making that weird angle. But that's all it is. It's weird angles.
Well, and if I remember correctly, the pike you made had like a short blade at the top and maybe a short blade at the back as well. It was almost like a
So
three-bladed affair. Is that correct?
so it had a blade at the tip, and then it had the actual scythe blade,
Yeah, which
and
was
then
like a
on the other,
24-inch blade or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, maybe even shorter than that.
Mm-hmm.
But it also had. So basically, it was a cross guard that
Oh, yes.
I put
Okay.
the quillions on differently.
Okay.
So if you think of it like that, that's kind of the idea.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
um, it, it it has, instead of the long blade at the top, it was one of the arms of the cross saber, and
Yeah.
then it was on a extension and also had a tonfa grip on it, so you could actually swing it like a real world scythe versus
Well, and the real
um,
world scythe generally does have a right angle grip at a weird angle because it's a reaping tool for harvesting
mhm,
ground, harvesting tall grains at ground level, right? Um,
correct.
and that requires one grip pointing towards the sky, of course, and then you might have
Mhm.
another grip pointing at 90 one way, 90 another way, right? Or just the shaft itself, and you're holding it that way. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, now that you're saying this, it's kind of coming back to me. And I feel like on my old phone, I even took a picture of it because I was having so much fun with this concept for a while.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like Alan, even though you are one of those people who's very realistic about these exotic weapons, you're also one of those people like three sectional saber or saber sight. You're also one of the first ones to go, whatever, I'll try it. Like saber sai. I saw many years ago somebody who was doing choreography had gotten their own pair of saber sai made, and
Mhm.
sai has always been one of my favorite weapons to use. And I think, first of all, they teach you a lot about Jarkai, which is great.
Yes.
There's also some of the Tonfa type stuff involved where you use the forearm and the punching techniques and basically
Mhm.
just normal ass karate blocks and stuff.
Mhm.
So that's really useful because it teaches you structure, body structure when you're parrying and block, and that counter offense of being able to block with one, strike with the other, very Jarkai style.
Mhm.
So Sai is great, but somebody made a saber Sai. It really doesn't make a lot of sense because the way that you use a real world Sai involves gripping with your fingers over top of the cross and like you see Raphael and Ninja Turtles blocking swords with his Sai. That's true. That's great. And it would have happened, but also he would have had to make sure his fingers were out of the way because 9 times out of 10, your fingers are actually gripping right where that sword would have cut. So
Yep.
it's one of those things where you learn the things that are specific this is true of anything we're talking about tonight. You learn the things that are specific to that weapon, such as a sai, but then when you throw it into a saber, it doesn't exactly apply the same. You can use things similarly, but you have to be aware of what's different. But then if you create something like an actual saber sai, Yeah, now you're just in the world of let's just have fun with this. Let's figure out how we can make this believable, right?
Right.
I think the way she had it was there were metal tines on the side, which is fine, like it's just like part of a saber hilt. And she wasn't competing with these. And then the blade that was down the middle. It was great. She actually had it so that there was like a ricasso, if you will. There was an unenergized, just a metal part of the sai that she could grip her finger around so she could use them like regular sai.
Hmm.
And there was maybe a 12 to 15 inch polycarbonate blade on the end. I thought it was actually very cool.
Yeah,
And for choreography, it just made so much sense to create a character that would use something like that. We're having fun
for
with this.
sure.
It is a fantasy world. We have to remind ourselves of this constantly. And
Hmm.
even real martial arts that, like, dude, karate's a fantasy world. Unless you're
Hmm.
actually fighting,
Hmm.
unless you're actually attacked, Krav
Right.
Maga is a fantasy world. Unless somebody actually pulls a gun on you, you move it to the side and elbow the crap out of them 20 times. That's it. Otherwise, it's fantasy. You're practicing for a situation that you genuinely, generally hope is not actually going to happen.
That you're hopefully trying to avoid.
Right. Like a sword fight. Nobody actually
Right.
wants to get in a sword fight. Okay,
Right.
regardless of some crazy people you might see on in Germany on YouTube. Sorry, Germany, that's not your fault. That's their fault.
Hmm.
We love you, Germany. You're one of our best listener bases. We love you to pieces.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there's this moment of all these things. I think the underlying principle is you learn whatever you want. It's all good, and it
Hmm.
all will help you. Because let's be fair, none of the weapons we have on Earth, except for swords, really resemble sabers, sticks, and swords. That's it. But
Right.
there's so many things we're taking out of this that we can go, okay, well, spatial awareness, that's important, right? Not cutting yourself with the lightsaber itself, that's important. So not hitting yourself, right? Being able to differentiate techniques, well, that's useful no matter what. That's useful, like if I can differentiate a karate kick from a Muay Thai kick at a deep level on fighting, that's a good skill. But also, does it matter? No, not really. Not if they both kick. But
Hmm.
that's kind of what we're saying. It's like, does it matter if you can't grip the sai the same way? No, not really. If you're understanding Jarkai principles as a matter of using a sai or as a matter of using two tonfa, you understand some Jarkai principles. Maybe you understand sword and shield a little better by using tonfa. Real sword, real shield, real tonfa. Now you can play with the lightsaber and you have all these techniques in your tool belt. And I think that's what we're both kind of saying is like, it might not all match up. Some of it might, but isn't it so cool to have it like there to
Right.
draw from?
Right. Exactly. And when you just, strip everything away, you're practicing, you're training. Whether or not
Yeah.
it's for anything quote unquote realistic or would work in the cage, you're practicing. You're gaining a skill.
Let me ask you this. Uh,
Hmm?
maybe we'll start to wrap it up here. What I mentioned at the beginning, so you can't say the same answer. I mentioned at the beginning that one of the first things I would teach people, or maybe the shicho of non-sword weapons, would be sticks. Right? Um,
Hmm.
give me let's just say an additional answer. What would be a non-sword weapon that if somebody was training saber martial arts or whatever, you wanted to integrate a real weapon into their training, what would be one of the first ones you give them that was not a sword or a stick?
Besides your bare hands.
Yes, besides your bare hands, because truthfully an excellent answer.
Yeah.
What would be
Uh,
another one you'd give them? And there's really no wrong answer. I'll just ask you to explain.
sure. Sure. Well, besides this sword and stick, there a lot of knife work
That's the
is
answer I was hoping you would say. Continue.
is there because there's so many different ways to do it, but it teaches distance, timing, and
Yeah.
uh, in a knife fight, you'll cut yourself usually almost as much, if not more,
Hmm.
than
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
opponent. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say knife.
Well, I think some of our friends, like Jason, comes to mind. Matthew comes to
Hmm.
mind. They do sword and stick training. Marina has recently been doing a lot of Katie. Um, I sorry, stick and knife training. I think you're spot on. I think they would agree. Like, and another
Mhm.
thing, this is maybe more of an Ataru concept or a Gemso concept in a lot of ways, but with knives, again, you're not really parrying and blocking unless it's a very large knife and you're parrying an arm or something like that. A lot of times, or with tomahawk and knife as a combo, a lot of times that knife will be there to cut or parry with a cut. Yeah, anyway, but it's not, you're not like blocking like you would with a sword. You're not like parrying the same way you would with a sword or a staff. You would be cutting at somebody's hand as they swing, or cutting at their leg as you block with your hand against their swing, or something along those lines. So yeah, and everybody has a knife, don't they? Like everybody
Mhm.
has a knife, like a butter knife with no edge, no serration, just a normal ass butter knife is such a good training tool that hopefully you're not swinging in front of your children or anything. Like a really great training tool. Um, all the martial arts companies, Century, Asian World, et cetera, Keen Edge, they sell polycarbonate and wooden and rubber knives, and it is humbling to practice with these. We had these beeping knives. They just had plastic
Mhm.
blades, and the blades were clear or metal. You could get either one. We had both. The clear ones were especially scary, and the metal ones were scary because you saw the flashing, but the fact that you couldn't see the flashing and then all of a sudden you were cut, but they would beep and light up every time you would get cut because they would just have like, an eighth of an inch of pressure.
Mhm.
And man, that's a humbling experience. And it teaches you that fancy crap doesn't work in a fast
Yeah.
situation like that, because a true knife fight where both people have knives, that is fast, and it's not good for either person. And you hear it all the time. Everybody gets cut. No, it's true. Everybody gets cut in a knife, and it's so scary to think about. Knife wounds are so hard to stitch back up, and the scary part to me is that the human body can take a lot more knife wounds generally than we think it can, and that is scary in and of itself because of how much trauma can really be inflicted before anybody even realizes it.
Right. Also, in the even in Western culture, like they had daggers and they were just piercing weapons. Like you wouldn't die for months.
No, yeah,
Like,
you're right, and the infection would take you after a while.
mhm.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
just the misery.
yeah,
Um,
just sepsis. You know,
yeah.
you may have killed the other guy, but he had the quick death. You know,
And again, the
so
question I've posed several times: what does this do for me in Saber martial arts? Well, I mean, first of all, the speed, the sheer speed that you can learn from knife training, that you can, with a longer weapon, you won't be as fast, but you're going to be so much faster than you were with that longer weapon initially.
mhm.
That's it. That's one thing. The other thing is that learning. This is something that I was watching some old duels I had with my old students from maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And I noticed that with the very basic GemSoe students, or no, sorry, not GemSoe, the students who had really only done a bunch of Shicho and a little Makashi, very basic strikes, very decent and whatever. But when they would do those committed swings and things, I was barely ever blocking or parrying anything. It was constantly slipping, evading, and counter striking, slipping, evading, striking the hand, and stuff like that. And I don't want to say that came from knife training, but it does come from knife training if you train with knives. So, and by the way, we don't condone like actually going out and cutting your training partners. Go get some damn training knives, okay? Make them out of cardboard and duct tape the cardboard together. That's actually a great way to do it. Uh, Cut the shape of the knife you want out of cardboard, do a couple layers, duct tape that together, electrical tape that together, and now you got a training knife, right? And the other thing that knife training teaches you is what to do with your offhand. I mean,
Your check hand, as they say.
yeah, talk about that for a little bit because I know in Kung Fu, you've mentioned the secret sword thing, right?
Hmm.
So talk a little about maybe knife and offhand or just offhand in general. Just give us a little taste because you brought up the knife thing in general.
Right. So in most in most times, you are using a one-handed weapon. The question is, what is my other hand doing? In some martial arts, they put another weapon in that hand. So like espada y daga, or a shield, or maybe
Yes.
maybe something else,
Or just
But
a
if you don't,
heavier single weapon that requires two hands to grip.
right? But sometimes you don't have a choice. So usually that hand's put away. So in the case of, let's say, fencing, you just put it on your hip, or you put it
Yeah, yeah.
away, so it's no longer a target for your opponent to hit. Because if it's just floating out there, it's a target. Um,
It can also
and then there,
counterbalance you on things like thrusts or lunges.
mhm, right? And then you have what's called a check hand, or a grappling hand, where in a lot of close up martial arts, uh, so things like Kali and Eskrima and
Your
you're
American
looking at,
arts that would involve
yeah,
things like tomahawks or Bowie knives or things
yeah.
like that.
More often than not, you're also, you know getting close enough to be within arm's length. And if you're within arm's length, you're going to use your arm. And the easiest way to not get hit is to take away a weapon. And so we check that arm, or that other weapon, with our weapon.
Yes.
And that's kind of how uh, check check hands work. Like, I don't want to just swing it around there for all willy nilly, but I also don't want it to stand still so that it
Yeah.
becomes a target.
Well,
But
and
so I'm going to employ it to my advantage by making sure we control your other limb.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, you see it in, you mentioned Kali or just Filipino martial arts in general, anything from
Hmm.
Southeast Asia that involves
Right.
knife work generally has a very strong check hand culture. And I say it
Hmm.
that way for because that's kind of what it is. It's a cultural thing where that check hand is doing everything that the weapon hand is doing. But it doesn't get involved in the danger as much. It somehow it teaches you that balance of, like you said, not making it a target, but like a lot of my Suresu in Makashi, we stick our hand behind our back most of the time, or it's extended behind us to balance.
Hmm.
Neck, that's fluid. That rule is fluid. I change it up a little bit depending on the techniques, but with Suresu, 9 times out of 10, I use a check hand system,
Hmm.
and Shien as well. I use a check hand system. Ataru, I use a check hand system because it's a balance. It's a counterbalance, and again, I'm striking with the weapon first, or I'm using the weapon to counter the weapon, but I'm using the check hand to complement my own body and counterbalance their body. So, in the case of maybe stick fighting or knife fighting, real world stick or knife fighting, you're checking the actual person's arm. You might strike with the stick, you check their arm, you're shoving it back into their body so that, like you said,
Hmm.
you're eliminating that weapon for the beat, right? For
Right.
one beat, you're eliminating that weapon. Then you do something else because they're going to do something else. But then you
Hmm.
check again. And I learned that in Kempo too. I mean, with punches and kicks and elbows and all that stuff, same thing. You do an elbow, you check out of that elbow with a palm strike, right? Then you throw a punch, and then you check out of that with another punch or an elbow or a kick. Everything has another thing to cover its ass, basically.
Right.
And that is what you learn from a check hand. But there is the balance of not making it a target because it can't just do nothing. My karate teacher used to say, don't let it count change. It's got to do something else, right? It's got
Right.
to do something that's going to benefit you. It can't just be count and change. My MMA teacher now, um, just he'll just come right up to you and just remind you constantly. Just that thing's got to be by your chin. If it's not doing something, it's by your chin, right? Um, and then for the kids, I just tell them I'm going to give your face a high five. And of course, I don't smack children, but I do go up to them and just dead hand, just touch their face with 5 fingers, right? Touch their cheek with 5 fingers when they drop their hands in MMA class or in Kung Fu class. And nobody walks out of there hurt, I promise you. But you just walk by, you just touch their face. They don't even realize that their hand was 6 inches lower than they thought it was. And you're just reminding them. So that check hand thing, it's the same idea. You're constantly just covering your bases. Even if it were to get cut by a lightsaber, theoretically, the idea is that it's balancing, it's able to move out of the way. Maybe you use it to bait them to strike somewhere. In Suresu or Shien, I would definitely employ that strategy. Maybe extend it in front of your saber so that you can be confident in your timing and distance, something that you mentioned already. Timing and distance is literally everything, no matter what you're doing. So you reach it out ahead of your saber, you yank it back, and you strike over top, right? That's the same thing as practicing punch in martial arts class, right? Straight punch, chamber it back to your chin or chamber it back to your chest or whatever. Punch. Same thing. You reach your hand out in front, you yank it back, and you strike over top. It's the same idea. And this is just stuff for people to think about. I mean, you don't have to do any of this stuff. This might give you ideas of how you can employ other things in your training. You also mentioned something earlier that I just want to briefly touch on before we go, which was kind of knowing maybe you didn't say it exactly like this, but I kind of read it like knowing what the weapon's actual purpose is, not necessarily using it for purposes that wouldn't be suitable for it. You didn't say it exactly that way, but we talked about like not blocking with flexible weapons and stuff like that. Knives and axes and clubs are very much the same way. I wanted to bring this up because I saw some training videos and things, and I've attended seminars as well, where I've seen people teach things, and again, when I'm in class and I'm a student, I generally keep my mouth shut for the most part. And I keep my thoughts to myself until I process things, right? So I never call people out for things in the moment. I'm not a dojo sweeper, you know what I mean? But I have seen YouTube videos and things where I immediately question or in a seminar, I immediately am thinking questions about like that move doesn't seem like that's that purpose. One thing I can say is I've seen people teach tomahawk classes where their entirety of their class was teaching people how to fence with an axe. Use it like a fencing saber. They're parrying with the wooden haft and underneath of the beard of the axe, and they're making a mess of things and hooking things that they didn't intend to hook and getting chips in there. But they never actually went through the time to think about this specific weapon. Maybe they did, but as somebody who has done that for certain weapons, and you can attest as well, you got to look at it. You got to swing it. You got to feel it. You got to sleep with it and cuddle it, right? You got to eat with it and read stories to it and figure out what this weapon is all about. Mm-hmm. And you'll quickly find out some things are not suitable for these things. And some things it's highly suitable for. Like if sticks, clubs, axes, knives, that's your flexible weapons, that's your forte, then you'll figure out that they're suitable for hitting people before they can make you worry about defending yourself or blocking or parrying, right? Hitting people in the moments between where you would have had to block or parry, and you can just dodge instead. You can just get good at footwork and motion instead. That's So you gotta learn the purposes. Don't spend your time and money teaching or learning things that are not going to be respectful of the weapon's dignities, so to speak. That weapon has a spirit. That weapon has a personality, just like we all do, and you want to play to its strengths. You want to enjoy it for what it's worth. And if you're not, it's okay. Try something else, or maybe try from someone else, or look into more, and then that's kind of the beauty of the lightsaber. It can be all of these things and none of these things, and that's what should make you hungry for all of these things. And then back to the lightsaber. So I don't know. You got anything else you wanna kind of dabble on this? Any other weapons you want to
No.
mention? Honorable mentions maybe of some stuff that's good for people to maybe easy. We said spear. That's another easy one for people to learn. Got an honorable mention weapon for someone that's easy to learn, or maybe easy to start learning.
Um, to start learning, really, if you are into weapons, you'll dabble in everything.
That's a
So
good point. Yep.
just find something that inspires you. Find
Simple
something that's
motions. Find a
yeah.
teacher or a instructional, if you will, that's
Hmm.
easy to understand and speaks to your sensibilities.
And know that not every teacher knows every single weapon,
Yeah, yeah,
and not every
yeah.
teacher should know
Yours
every
truly
single weapon.
included, right?
Yeah.
We got to take responsibility for our own words and ideas, and that's true.
Hmm.
Like, though you and I have both dabbled in many, probably more weapons than we can remember,
Hmm.
definitely more weapons than we can name on here. And though there are so many more in the we didn't even talk about things like the African Kapinga or
Hmm.
Ikwa or the Zulu shields and things like that. We didn't even talk about them, and we should have, because you talk about scythe, you talk about tonfa. I mean, the Kapinga is all of those things into one, and as
Hmm.
scary as any weapon that's ever graced the earth. We
Hmm.
talked about whips. We didn't talk about the Indian whip sword. I can't remember what it's
Hmm.
called, but that thing is the scariest thing ever, also. And so, these are just things for people to get into, and I think you're right. You're gonna dabble in everything, but become a nerd about it, get passionate about it, and it will make your sword and or saber work better. I promise
That's
you.
right.
You really can't detract unless the stuff you're learning is detractful, but you won't know
Hmm.
unless you try. You won't know unless you
Right.
try. Also, don't let anybody swing sharp weapons at you. Period. Can we just agree on that? You do. You're an adult. Hopefully, you do what you want with your life. If you're not an adult, don't do what you want with your life. Get your parents to sign a permission slip first. But don't let people swing sharp swords at you. That is a thing that you will find on YouTube. You will find people. I won't name names, but if you find their names, don't listen to them when they tell you that practicing with a sharp sword is the only way to get it for the real. Nobody's swinging swords at each other in real life anymore, unless it's a crazy thing you hear about in the news on a freak day. Okay, and I'm knocking on wood for everybody right now that they never have to witness that. Nobody's swinging swords in the 21st and a half century, ever. So it's all fantasy. It's all virtual reality. It's all fun. So have fun with it, and know that it's all good to learn. Know that it's all applicable. We'll probably dabble in this conversation later. I'm sure K Sensei has some thoughts on this because he's got weaponry in his brain that we've never even heard of. Um, then I'm sure some other people. I was just thinking about Ario in Puerto Rico. Oh man, some of the South American culture weapons.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, there's so much variety, even in just
Hmm.
one little country at a time. So much variety. So it's all
Hmm.
applicable to the lightsaber because the lightsaber is the galaxy far, far away, which is everything about Earth and
Hmm.
more.
Yeah. And
Alan,
think about this
yes sir.
as well. Is once again, there is no end all be all. everything's a work in progress. There's no perfect weapon, perfect defense, anything like that. But if you are curious uh, in weaponry, find something that it makes you want to come back over and over again.
Yeah.
Come back and do it with passion, because the passion that you put into something will come back to you tenfold. So if you're passionate about weapons training, be passionate about
Yeah.
weapons training. And if something isn't working for you, then respectfully decline and try something else. Just like you said, it is a work in
Yeah.
progress. So continue to work in progress and continue to do things to inspire yourself
We
and hopefully inspire others.
I love that. That you just reminded me. We had an older student. He wasn't old, but older. And at the time he was in his late 40s, and older than the average weapons student, I'll say, because the average weapons student was 20s or younger at the time. And he really wanted to learn how to use canes, like Bartitsu almost, or Sherlock Holmes fighting, if you will. But not just that, also, there are Asian martial arts that use normal crooked canes, straight canes. There's shillelaghs from Ireland and things like that. So he was just very interested in cane weaponry. And so he, like, we didn't you mentioned earlier, not everybody knows every weapon. We knew nothing about cane fighting really, except that it was something that some of our teachers had done years before, and we had some canes laying around from that time. He didn't even know that. So we were like, yeah, we'll order a couple more, and we'll go through some techniques from our like video, like literal VHS tapes of cane self-defense and stuff. And then we looked up some Bartitsu stuff, and just, it's all good. Everybody's doing this. That's what the internet is for now. Right. And it's all good. And we taught ourselves amidst our students how to cane fight. Now, fast forward, 5 or 6 years from then, and I broke my foot, and I was walking around in a boot with a cane, all teaching karate class in a boot with a cane, and walking in and out of liquor stores where, like hopefully I wouldn't get stuck up. But I had this cane, and I felt like a superhero, right? With this cane, even though my bum foot was slowing me down, I felt like, well, you know what though? If I had to get in a scrap, like they'd be in real trouble.
Right, right.
So I think it's cool. I think if you're interested in something, maybe if you want to see a holocron class on a specific weapon, whether we've done it or not, maybe we'll do something where we're forced to learn a little bit about something. And reach out to us. Let us know if you want more information about a specific weapon, or if you've got one that you want to share your knowledge of it with us, and reach out to us. We're excited to hear from you.
Yeah.
Subscribe. All the
Stay
things.
curious.
Go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, I was gonna say stay curious.
Yeah, stay curious. Yeah, subscribe. Just stay on our website here and there. Go on Instagram. Like I said, for just day-to-day news, it's much harder to update a website than it is to just go on Instagram at SMA Foundation and see what we're up to. Everything will be there, and then the most important stuff will be in other places as well. Everything will be on the podcast. We'll announce all that as we do it. I mentioned possibly going to see TPLA this weekend. Alan and I, as you may have heard last week, we're going to Michigan in August. So if you're curious, I believe they don't just do for instructors and coaches, which is what Alan and I are doing, but they also do just like a competitor's, like a day, I believe. So there's an Eventbrite, I believe it's called Light Fencing Activation Workshop. So if you'd like to check that same workshop out, maybe meet me and Alan, maybe meet the TPLA guys, and you can get to Michigan in August, go to Eventbrite and look up the light fencing activation workshop and see what kind of options they have there for you to learn that style of saber martial arts, which is, like I said before, a little bit different than what Alan and I usually do, than what saber martial arts generally as an organization we employ, but no less valid, and also just a very cool different thing for us to experience and for us to bring to you guys later. So yeah, we'll be getting certified in that in August, and that'll be fun. Plus, it'll be neat to nerd out with some fellow martial artists. And as always, Alan, I'm going to be really looking forward to Saber Valhalla. Like, I hope everybody else is down, because
Yeah.
this is a real thing. I haven't Saber Valhalla since 2 years ago in Virginia, and we didn't even have Courtney with us that night. It was a shame. So yeah, I don't think Courtney's going to this, but maybe we can convince him to.
Maybe.
All right, Alan. I think that's about it. Everybody knows what to do. Subscribe, and please share this with one person, and/or leave us a review, and/or at least click the thumbs up button or the 5-star button. Just do it. You know it's not it's not going to affect your algorithm that much. You know there's already nerd stuff on there. It's not going to change anything. All it's going to do is give you more of the stuff you like. So please check it out. Ready? Steady. Bring your own saber.
This party's over.